At this point, Insurgency has been around a while. We had the mod, then the first retail release, and now we're on Insurgency Sandstorm. And the question I've gotten the most while streaming is, how does it stack up to the original retail release? So that's the question I'm going to be answering in this review. Believe it or not, Sandstorm runs on a completely different engine than the first game. The first game was on the Source engine, Insurgency Sandstorm runs on the Unreal engine. If you just looked at it, you probably wouldn't know, and if you played it, you probably wouldn't know unless someone told you. The movement feels pretty much like the first game. The graphics are pretty much like the first game with some small minor upgrades just from the engine change. Lighting definitely looks better, but aside from that, it looks more or less the same. That's not necessarily bad or good. Graphically, it doesn't look bad, but it also doesn't look like the next Crysis. It's certainly passable and will serve its purpose. The devs did say it was easy to port in their assets to the Unreal Engine, so you probably shouldn't be expecting them to completely redo everything from scratch when they were already that far in. Point being, graphically there's not really any surprises or any letdowns. What has always been the best thing about Insurgency has not been its graphics. The best thing about Insurgency has definitely been the little details. There is so much polish put into small things that they don't really even need to put any polish into, and most other games don't. For example, the selector switch actually moves to what you're putting your fire mode on. If your AK is in fully automatic, it's not going to be in safe mode like almost every other game. It will move accordingly. And that small detail doesn't necessarily change gameplay, but it definitely is something I appreciate. But with every small detail that really doesn't mean anything, there's another detail added that does add to the gameplay. All the voice lines reacting accordingly to what's going on around them, all the explosions, all the loud gunfire, all the reloading sound effects, all of this makes for this, at times, incredibly chaotic game. And the first thing it reminded me of was when Battlefield 3 was at its height, when you have so much going on around you and it's almost overwhelming. This game captures that overwhelming feeling so perfectly. But perhaps I should take a step back and explain what the gameplay itself actually is. If you played the first Insurgency, you pretty much know what you're getting into. There's not really any major surprises here. It more or less feels like the first game, but with completely different maps and different guns. And that's okay. I know a lot of people will complain about this, and I've never quite understood it. I'm that guy that has always liked Far Cry and wanted more Far Cry and didn't complain when Far Cry 4 was more or less just Far Cry 3 with band-aids on it and a completely different map with different guns. I loved that because I loved Far Cry 3, so I wanted more. I'm not sure why people want everything to completely change in the next game. Then it wouldn't be a sequel. If you change it too much, people complain because people liked the first game and now it's no longer like that one. But if you don't change it at all, people complain because nothing changed, so you can't win either way. This game was for the crowd that liked the first game. And if you liked the first game, you were going to like this one. I will say that much. This game is split between PvE and PvP. Let's start with the PvE. One of my favorite co-op experiences of all time is Rainbow Six Vegas and Rainbow Six Vegas 2 with Terrorist Hunt. And that's probably the best analog I can really put to the co-op in this game, except with objectives. It would be nice if we had a game mode that only just put enemies on a map and said, hey, clear out all the enemies and then you won. I would like that, something simple just to test out guns and enjoy myself. But the co-op mode is still fun too. The co-op modes use a linear form of the other multiplayer maps. The objectives range from simply capturing an objective, destroying an objective, or defending an objective you just captured for a certain amount of time. It's overall very simple, but it also still keeps that sort of teamwork you need to succeed. If everyone tries to go lone wolf, you may get a lot of kills, but you're probably all going to die and not win. Keep in mind, you only have one life. If you die, you stay dead until that next objective is captured or until you all die and you fail. When that next objective is captured or destroyed, you all respawn. It continues this way, you push forward to the next objective. If you get all the objectives, you win. Very simple and pretty fun. I really enjoy that this is in the game, because Insurgency can be a pretty competitive game. It's meant to be a hardcore tactical shooter, and after you've played the multiplayer hardcore tactical parts for a long period of time, for maybe 3 or 4 hours, your brain starts kind of wanting to wind down, but you still want to play the game, so co-op is a great place to go. But now let's shift focus to the actual multiplayer, and again, it's similar to the first game. The main objective I want to be talking about here is Skirmish. Skirmish is sort of like, say, Battlefield Conquest, but different. You're put on a multiplayer map with different cap points and objectives. There are 2 weapon caches closest to your spawns that you can blow up, and then 3 objectives you can capture. Respawning happens in waves, so your whole team will respawn at the same time, but you have a limited amount of respawn waves. Basically, get rid of the enemy's respawn waves and you win. All of this sounds pretty standard and basic, except Insurgency takes the whole tactical hardcore route. You will die in 1 to 2 shots, and you need to aim. The aiming system is similar to that of, say, Red Orchestra, where if you're aiming from the hip, the gun will sort of float across the screen. This really encourages you to aim down your sights. Guns also have a proportionate amount of recoil, so you can't simply spray and pray unless you're using, say, an SMG. Even then, it's not exactly the most effective thing in the world, but it can work. It's one of the few games where putting your gun to semi-automatic and double tapping is actually very effective. This isn't to say that you can't counteract this recoil, but it's significantly more difficult than, say, the laser beam guns of Call of Duty. This game is aimed for the hardcore crowd, and it does not hold your hand. If you suddenly die, chances are you have no idea what killed you. Even better chances is that you really shouldn't have been in that spot when you were, and this game is going to let you figure that out on your own. This leads to an extreme response. The highs are very high. When you're doing well in a game, it feels so satisfying. More satisfying than anything else I've played.
Nice.
Oh, nice. Oh.
Everyone just dies.
That looks so silly on my screen. A puddle of blood just popped out of nowhere.
Most kills. I got the most kills out of that too.
But when you're doing bad, it can be downright infuriating. But that's how Salt works. When you have someone being really salty on one side, you have someone feeling really good about themselves on the other. With a little bit of time and practice, you're that person that's feeling really good, and maybe someone else is being salty. Surprisingly enough though, the community seemed to be pretty friendly. Of course, you might get that one person in game blaming his teammates for everything, but for the most part, everyone was talking in voice comms and communicating and being friendly, nice, and supportive. Or at the very least telling you what you should do so that you're not being so not helpful to the team. Did I mention this is a game really based on teamwork? Because this really requires teamwork. I definitely have a certain appreciation for these types of games, because nowadays they're not too common. Almost every game nowadays is turning into a hero shooter, even Call of Duty, or a battle royale, even Call of Duty. Insurgency knows what they want to be, and they're not trying to chase the latest trends. They're trying to make a hardcore tactical shooter, and if that's what you like, you are going to like this game. Some people may be disappointed that it didn't change or really improve too much from the last game, but I don't see that as much of a downside because the last game was already very good. If you liked that last one, you are going to like this one. There's not really any big surprises. It's still Insurgency, but with different content, and that's perfectly fine by me. Looking at my notes, I've pretty much only written down positive things. I was enjoying my time while I played the game. It's not my favorite game of all time, as this genre isn't necessarily at the very top, but I have a lot of respect for it. I did have one complaint about the game though, and this one isn't necessarily the game itself as much as it is how it runs. And this can change over time with bug patches and stuff like that, but this game isn't very optimized on some maps. Now I know I have a bit of a CPU bottleneck. I have an i7-3820, 16GB of RAM, and a 980 Ti. But the reason I know that optimization is a bit of a problem is because some maps will be running perfectly fine until you get to specific spots and then your frame rate tanks. This is a really big indicator that there's something going on wrong in the game, rather than just your computer not being good enough. On top of this, these frame rate drops were also experienced by the people I was playing with in the same areas. Most maps do run perfectly fine at 60 FPS and I didn't really have drops, but some maps really needed a little bit of work. Specifically Summit. That one is the worst offender out of them all as of right now. I kept this till the end of the review because that's a problem you were going to experience as of right now on launch, but over time will be patched out. At least I hope. But that about sums up my review for Insurgency Sandstorm. Again, if you liked the first one, you owe it to yourself to get this one, and there's not really a whole lot more to it. Huge thanks goes to all of you that were watching me on Twitch. I did a giveaway for this game, gave away a few keys for it. If you want to come follow me and hang out, here's my Twitch, twitch.tv/Jarek4GamingDragon, and also a big shout out goes to my patrons over on Patreon, patreon.com/Jarek4. You guys literally pay my rent and bills. I love you guys so much. Thanks for showing up to this review, and I will see you next time.